Your Dog's Friend is a nonprofit 501c3 whose mission is to help keep dogs out of shelters by educating and supporting their humans. We promote positive method of training and behavior modification through stress-free methods. As part of that mission, we offer free webinars like the one you're about to watch. Subjects range from dog behavior, stress-free training, and other tools to help you understand your relationship with your dog. If you like the webinar, be sure to give us a thumbs up. Click the notification bell and subscribe to our channel. By subscribing, you'll be notified when future videos are posted. Now enjoy the webinar.
Today's webinar is Helping Dogs Who Worry About People, sponsored by Your Dog's Friend, a nonprofit 501c3 whose mission is to help keep dogs out of shelters by educating and supporting their humans. My name is Carrie Horn. I'm a volunteer with Your Dog's Friend, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. Our speakers today are Susan Sanderson and Marnie Montgomery. Susan teaches classes at Your Dog's Friend and sees private clients in Arlington, Falls Church, Alexandria, and other neighboring areas. She is a Pat Miller certified trainer, level 3, and a Karen Pryor Academy certified training partner. She currently competes with her English Shepherd in UKI agility and volunteered for 8 years with the Animal Welfare League of Arlington, managing dog play groups and assisting with behavior cases. Marnie Montgomery is founder and lead trainer of Joyful Dog LLC, serving Loudoun and Western Fairfax counties in Virginia. Marnie is a certified professional dog trainer, knowledge assessed, level 4, Pat Miller certified trainer, certified Tellington T-Touch practitioner, and fear-free certified professional. Marnie teaches the online reactive dog class through Your Dog's Friend and sees clients one-on-one. Before we begin, I'd like to mention to you that Your Dog's Friend is a nonprofit. So if you find this webinar helpful, please consider making a donation to help support these free webinars and the other free resources that we offer. If you'd like to donate, you can visit our website at yourdogsfriend.org and click on the donate button in the upper right-hand corner. We really appreciate your support and can't do what we do without you. So without further ado, let's get started with today's webinar. Over to you, Marnie.
All righty. So I'm going to go ahead and share our slides so that you'll have some eye candy and information as we move forward. Here we go. So as you know, we are here for Hello Stranger, which is a webinar for dogs who worry about people. So introduction, if you're here, you probably already have an idea of what stranger danger looks like. It's a dog who's concerned about people. You may often see a reaction, lunging, barking, or a fearful reaction. We're going to be taking a look kind of under the hood at some of the aspects that contribute to this stranger danger and what it looks like, as well as giving you some tools and techniques to help your dogs who have stranger danger. First, we're going to look at the who, what, when, where, and why of stranger danger. In particular, what are the targets and triggers? What does that behavior look like? Again, the context in which it happens, which is a little bit different from the setting, the physical geography of when it happens, as well as taking a look at some of the underlying causes of stranger danger.
Okay, so I'm going to be first talking a little bit about who, but first I just wanted to share this quote that I kind of came upon a couple weeks ago, and I don't know, I just thought it was really lovely. The opposite of anxiety isn't calm, it's trust. It immediately got me thinking about our relationship with our dogs. So keeping that in mind, a lot of times we're focused on calming our dogs in that moment where everything is, all hell is breaking loose, so to speak. And that's a really difficult thing. So we're gonna work a little bit on that today, but we're also going to be teaching you all how to build and practice predictable patterns of things that you and your dog can do together when things get tough. And that will create some nice trust between the two of you all. So on to who. And obviously the first who, the obvious who, is strangers. And so it's not just our dogs don't know, but sometimes it can be just somebody who has an odd profile. Dogs are really interested in the way people move, their profile. So people carrying packages, wearing different outfits, moving differently, looking a little bit different than what we normally, what they might normally see. The next thing is children. And so we might look at this and think, oh my God, this is just so lovely. These happy children running towards us. For a lot of our dogs, this is the stranger. um, this can be pretty upsetting. And not because these kids mean anything, bad, but just because they're high pitched, their voices are really kind of out there, their body language is sort of erratic, and they're moving a whole lot. So there are plenty of dogs who find kids really, really concerning. The next one is pedestrians. And we kind of have this section because our dogs so frequently are on leashes, which means that they are kind of restrained. They can't make a lot of big choices about what they're doing when they see someone that worries them. And so a lot of times, so we include this as well, kind of think about, people who are approaching your dog while your dog is on leash. And especially those wonderful dogs love me people. Those are the ones that we really need to kind of learn how to manage. Those are the ones that are going to be walking towards your dog, staring at them, reaching towards them, leaning over them. And then finally, people approaching the home or the property where you live, literally your dog's property. Plenty of our dogs will react to people approaching or entering their property or home. This is actually a really common thing. And you think about it, it's like nobody alerted them that, your great Aunt Tilly is showing up suddenly, or, you're getting an Amazon delivery. But we will be going over some techniques to help you manage this and help your dog feel a little bit better about this. So,
All right.
Marnie.
Okay, so then we have the what. The what does it look like? What's your dog's response? The one that, perhaps is the most familiar is fight. And, we think, oh my gosh, the dog who's fighting is a bad dog. But in fact, it's a dog who is most likely fearful and doing, their best version of, preemptively making the things that they're afraid of move away. We have flight. It can be a dog running away from stuff, but it also can be a dog who's kind of hiding as well. And, again, that dog, we may mistake them for being a good dog. And of course, they are a good dog, but this behavior is an indication of their concerns. They're moving to a place where they feel safe. This is my personal favorite behavior in response to stress, both my dog's and my own. And you may, in fact, see my own dog doing some version of this going, "You're zooming. Why are you not dealing with me?" And this is a fidget or a fool around. These behaviors are behaviors that we can mistake for a happy dog, an excited dog, a dog who loves to interact with people. And, and our dogs may be that absolutely in some circumstances, but also these behaviors can be great stress relievers, as well as stress indicators. So in these two photos on the left, we have this gorgeous white shepherd, jumping on a person who's having a fabulous time. We'll be getting into body language later in our webinar, but if you notice, that dog's musculature is really tight. The mouth is open, but again, it's really kind of a taut rather than a relaxed and easy mouth. Those can be signs of stress. And this cute, think an Aussie, who is licking the hand that's reaching toward him, we often think, oh, they're giving kisses. But in fact, if you look at this photo, the eyes are tight, the muscles of the face are kind of tight, the corners of the mouth are coming forward, and that little tongue flick is actually one really characteristic sign of stress. We often call that the kiss to dismiss. I also call it, I could bite you, but I'm not. So those are, the fidget fool around, I love them, but they are signs of concern on our dog's part. A faint or a shutdown. Dogs don't generally actually go into a full faint when they're under stress, but they will withdraw into themselves. They will shut down. And by that, we're talking about a thing called learned helplessness. If things are way too much for our dogs, they may choose simply, as we humans often do, not to interact. It's just, this is all too hard. I am just going to lie here until this is over. And again, we can mistake that for a dog who's comfortable, a well-behaved dog. And again, they may be a well-behaved dog for sure, but when they're in a faint or a shutdown, they're definitely not comfortable. And then a freeze. One, in my personal opinion, Susan, you may agree or disagree. This is one of the scariest things we can see a dog do. This is when all movement stops. It can absolutely look like this dog in the photo. All movement stops. They may even seem to stop breathing for a moment. Everything becomes suddenly, utterly, weirdly still. And very often the freeze is the last thing before a bite. So if we're, in a situation where all of a sudden the dog stops, we just kind of want to back up. We want to take the pressure off and we want to re-strategize. That's different from the pausing that you'll see in play. So if your dog is, jump, 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 happy, bendy, playing, and then all of a sudden stops and then bendy again, wouldn't worry about it. But this sudden thing often happens when we reach into a dog's space or when, someone approaches that they're worried about. That's a freeze. All right.
Okay. So I'm going to talk a bit about when does your dog display stranger danger? This can change within a dog because these are things that are sort of added to your dog's day, events, activities that may sort of help tip some of that agitation over into, whoa, I was worried about that person and I wasn't going to say anything, but now I'm really worried about them because, and we're going to go over a list of a few of those things. The first thing is just things that add arousal. This can get we all know our dogs get hyped up, and some of the things that can add arousal include, as we see here, rough play with other dogs, getting your dog excited yourself, by, some rough play, running around the house. Maybe there's like 5 or 6 kids running around the house. And then the last thing is basically just, doing a whole lot of things, like a lot of throwing of a ball or a lot of chasing, or just this all depends on kind of the intensity. And it isn't that we're saying these things are bad. It's just that we want you to keep these things in mind when, maybe, the next thing that's going to be happening in your dog's life is that they're going to have to be near someone who maybe they don't know real well. So these things will kind of, tip away from our favor for our dogs making good choices. The next thing is things that tire your dog mentally, like, I don't know, playing chess, but seriously, like a training session that was, particularly challenging. Even solving a puzzle, these lovely puzzles we give our dogs can, increase a bit of stress, add a little bit of stress and arousal. And then things that tire the dog physically. And this is where it's very similar to what we talked about a few seconds ago about just adding arousal. But it's, maybe your dog has had a day where there was an unusually long walk or an extended fetch or running session. If you run with your dog, these are not bad things, or these are not things that you should stop doing with your dog, but just be aware, if these had been on the menu, that might make your dog who is a little concerned about people even more concerned about people. So the next one is surprises. And sometimes we kind of forget about this. And it could be something as simple as you're walking in your neighborhood and you're having a great walk, and then all of a sudden, boom, someone comes out from around the corner. It can be a sudden noise, a car backfire. It can be, you tripping and falling, just anything that's sort of out of the ordinary for your dog. And then so what all these things tend to do is create something. If we have 2 or 3 of these things, let's say within a period of time, we have what's called trigger stacking. And you all might have heard of trigger stacking. Trigger stacking happens to us humans as well. We might be having a regular day and, we have a toothache, and then our boss yells at us, and then, there's traffic on the beltway or something. And by the time 4 o'clock comes around, we are really in a bad mood. So our dogs can have the same things, 2 or 3 things over a relatively short period of time. And that period of time can be, an hour or even a day or even a couple of days, can tip your dog over into that sense of, again, not making great choices if they're already a little concerned about people. So, okay, Marnie, you're going to cover where next?
I am.
Yeah.
All right. So, as I alluded to in one of our first slides, the location in which you are with your dog can also contribute to their ability to handle strangers, can raise or lower their sense of stranger danger. So it occurs in specific places, of course, in their own space, their home, their yard, their neighborhood. These are all places that your dog begins to feel that they own, if you will. Not a scientific statement, but they become at home in those places, and so they want to protect them. And a stranger, your flaming clown who lives next door comes into the yard, or a delivery person, that's going to be a bit of a problem. Your neighborhood can also be a space that they feel that they own, at least parts of the neighborhood. Again, they're familiar places, and also our dogs don't read real estate maps. And so their sense of what's theirs is different perhaps from our sense. A stressful location at the vet. Obviously, we all know that that can be stressful for our dogs, at the groomer, at the bus stop, full of children and a lot going on. And if you notice in this photo, so I love this photo because the vet is being so gentle. She's being really respectful in the way she's just restraining the dog with a gentle hand on the dog's chest, and again, being really careful and thoughtful in the way that she's interacting. But you can see the tension in this dog's face. So even though she's doing her very best in that location, the dog's going, I am not having my best day. So when their options are limited, we got 2 slides for this. When they're confined, often behind a fence, in a crate, on leash. The leash, obviously, it keeps our dogs safe, keeps us, physically connected. There are many situations in which we need to be on leash. This guardian has shortened the leash here with the dog because they're in a crowd, but that tension on the leash can be really triggering. It can trigger that stranger danger response, and it certainly raises the anxiety level and the sense to which the dog is like, I have got no choice in this situation. And then when cornered, so we have, again, another sweet photo of kids with this really unutterably cute husky puppy. And, but if you notice, in many ways, that husky is cornered because surrounded by kids and also restrained. And, he seems pretty tolerant. Honestly, his body language is pretty floppy, although we have a bit of that tongue thing happening. But he or she have no options in this situation. So we want to be aware that this can lead to a stranger danger reaction. And again, a strange location, that can be a novel place, somewhere your dog has never been before, but it can also be a weird space. Lighting, many of our dogs are really sensitive to lighting changes and weird lighting, and that can predispose them again to a stranger danger reaction. And then in and around the car. The car is like your dog's portable neighborhood, if you will. I'm sure I'll say many of us, because I have a dog and he's like that in the car, can be more nervous about strangers approaching when they're in the car. You'll notice that there may be specific amounts of distance where your dog's comfortable versus not. And it can also be when they're near the car, the same as your dog being outside the house and in their yard. Again, they can be very reactive, defensive towards strangers who approach.
Okay. So our last W is why. And this is, of course, everybody's favorite, because everybody wants to sort of create this story or this narrative about why their dog does this. And a lot of times we'll say things, especially if we have a dog that we've gotten from the shelter or a rescue, we'll say, oh, it must be because they, were beaten by a man with a mustache or something, or, they were frightened by, by a child or something. And that might be the case. And, sort of making these, guesses or making these assumptions are totally fine. But we really want to make sure that we don't let them get in the way of actually seeing the dog in front of us, and supporting that dog and respecting that dog. But there are some things that do feed into this why that we can kind of tease out sometimes. And that the first one, we're going to go over a handful here. The first one is genetics. Some breeds just have a tendency towards affiliative behavior with people, and some are bred to be more cautious. There are, let's say livestock guardian dogs, that are basically bred to be kind of cautious around new people because that's their, that's just baked in, and it's been baked in for 2,000 years. But then, on the other hand, it's like sometimes you'll run into a livestock guardian dog who is, the best thing they can think of is like, woohoo, new people playing. And you might have a golden retriever who, it's like we always think of golden retrievers as being bred for affiliative behavior, being comfortable with new people, eager to meet new people. You'll run into the occasional golden retriever who is, kind of, I feel about that. So this is just simply all to say that genetics can play a role, but it's basically a tendency towards this kind of behavior. But keep that in mind. So if you know a little bit about some of the genetics, some of the breed tendencies in your dog, that can give you an idea of what's going on. The next thing is just cautiousness and introversion. And again, this can be a breed tendency, certainly, but a lot of times this can just be who this dog is. I mean, certainly you have friends who are just the way they are. Maybe you're super outgoing, but your friend is maybe a little cautious about things. Not quite the party person that you are. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing bad has happened to them necessarily. That's just who they are. And then the next one is lack of socialization, and you'll see this listed kind of everywhere. And let me just give a really brief description of socialization, because like so many of the topics that we're going to go over here, that we have gone over and we're going to go over, we could spend hours on each one of these, or days even. But socialization is generally done when a dog is young. And what it ideally means is that we're exposing the dog to things in the world in a way that is fun and positive. Okay. And so sometimes that just doesn't happen. Either it literally doesn't happen because the dog just didn't get a chance to, learn a little bit about the world when they were a young dog. Or maybe when it did happen, it was handled a little clumsily, or, maybe people didn't recognize that the dog was like saying, whoa, no, this is too much for me, and, help the dog kind of back off. So that's, just a lot of times we can kind of, we might not know that for a certain dog, or we might know that for a certain dog, but it's certainly something that we want to keep in mind. So Marnie's going to talk a little bit about a few more.
I am. The first one is our medical issues. And we have some links here if you want to do a little bit more of a dive into pain in particular. Often a dog's behavior will be exacerbated by hidden pain that doesn't show up perhaps in a normal veterinary exam. If your dog suddenly shows stranger danger, or even if they have a persistent stranger danger, it's well worth looking into. So this second link is to a study by Daniel Mills. He's a veterinary researcher. He's a veterinary behaviorist. So that's a vet who has done extra work to really do a deep dive into behavior and help their clients with that. Studying the presence of pain in dogs with behavioral issues. And he says that about 80% of the dogs that he sees in his practice with reactivity, resource guarding, stranger danger, actually do have some form of pain, which is, honestly, I find that a shocking statistic. So in any case, it's well worth ruling out pain as a factor. Other issues are visual deficits. That's classes where I can totally, totally get on board with that. If your dog can't see well, or if they don't hear well, the deficits in their senses can cause them to be, again, more reactive, more stranger dangery, if that's an adjective. Past experiences in utero. Things that your dogs experienced as puppies when when their mom was pregnant with them can have an effect. Perhaps there was a stressful event, and so their mom and they were suffused with stress hormones. That can have an effect as well. The mom has that frightening experience, exposure to toxins. As with people, pretty much anything that happens when the puppies are in uterus can have an effect. When they're young, so we've spoken about socialization and how we want to make that be a positive experience for our young dogs. For some dogs, not all, but for some dogs, a negative experience when they're young, a single event can actually have a lasting effect, depending on the nature of the event, when it happened. So something, these things over which you have no control can affect how your dog responds to strangers now. And then epigenetics, the parental experience. And there's a link again if you want to do a deep dive into what that means. With apologies to all the neurobiologists who are here, I'm going to try and do just a brief explanation of what epigenetics is. And it's a field, I'm going to read with apologies again, it's a field that investigates heritable changes in the gene function. So what this means is it doesn't involve any change in the DNA sequence that our dogs, have on board, but it does affect the way that those genes are expressed. And it can affect the way those genes are expressed in the parent, and that change can be transmitted to the puppies, to their offspring. And Susan, did I miss anything on that? Because this
No,
is
no,
an art.
yeah.
It's a fascinating field.
It is.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
kind of mind-blowing, actually.
Yeah. And if you're a neurobiologist, please correct me in chat. That would be cool. And I actually see a couple of things in chat, so I'm going to take a quick look at it.
Sure.
Yeah, why don't we? Oh, we've got some great other links in here. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Carrie, for putting them in. Let's take a look before we break, because our next slide is a break. Anna asks, how do we rule out pain? I'll touch on that, and Susan, it'd be great if you touched on that as well. So there are a lot of different ways to rule out pain. If you suspect pain in a certain circumstance, for example, my young dog who keeps making cameo appearances, jumped the fence, jumped a 6-foot fence again and again when he was 10 months old. That's a bit young to be doing all that jumping over a fence. So in his case, I actually had an orthopedic exam to make sure that everything was as it should be, make sure there wasn't anything that was likely to be causing pain. One of the ways that we rule out pain, in collaboration with or consultation with your vet, of course, is some vets will prophylactically treat for pain where it's suspected because of behavior, even if they don't see a proximate cause with a physical exam. And what often happens is when they do that, the behavior in the dog will improve. Susan, do you want to take that question too?
Yeah, I mean, not to bum anyone out, but it's not easy sometimes. You know, a lot of times if we're lucky, yeah, we'll take the dog to the vet and it'll be like, oh yeah, his back left knee is the kneecap is slipping or something. I mean, you can kind of find something. And we think about ourselves, we think it's like we're not our best selves if things are feeling creaky or achy or anything like that. But it can be just an amazing variety of stuff. It can be a tooth that hurts.
Yeah.
It can be some gastrointestinal difficulty. It can be an earache or just ear discomfort. In addition to things like musculoskeletal pain. Because a lot of times I'll have clients say, oh, he can't be in pain. Look at him run around the backyard. And yeah, I mean, that might be, one thing that if, your dog used to run around the backyard and now they don't. But I don't know. I think of all the times that I've played tennis and I've hurt. But I really like playing tennis.
Yeah.
And it makes me feel good. So I always like to encourage people that if they think, oh, it can't be pain because my dog is running around the backyard. That should not be the final word necessarily. So anyway,
Yeah.
but it can, if you're lucky, yeah, you can kind of find something. If not, I mean, or not, or it can be something that, you end up going to a whole lot of people to kind of rule things out. So, but it's definitely done, of course, with the help of your vet and, so.
Yeah. So we got another question, and why don't we take Jan's question, and then we'll have our break. Yeah, so I'll just read Jan's message for the recording. This is so interesting. I never would have known about the effects of in utero and epigenetics on pups. My adopted dog is people shy, not dog shy. This is a great message, Jan. She grew up in a mobile home, which was 50 acres of land and was a one-owner dog. That's my dog's idea of heaven, I think. So she didn't meet barely any humans, but the one close by neighbor had a fenced yard and she played with the dogs while there. Jan says, I'll probably learn the answer to this, but hoping to learn if I hold her when we meet people, she's 15 pounds, is that a negative or just if she reacts badly? So my take is it depends on the dog. If she enjoys being picked up, if she knows she's about to be picked up and held, so she's not surprised, going back to the surprised border collie, and she's comfortable being picked up, then I think that is perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. If, on the other hand, she's nervous and tense when you pick her up, I'd be looking for other options. And we'll be looking at some of the other options later on. One thing to keep in mind with stranger danger is that often a dog who is comfortable and feels safe being picked up and held can also feel kind of two things. They can be inclined to guard you. It's like, there's my person, they're holding me, get away from my person. And the other is that she may feel empowered to react to strangers in a way that she wouldn't if she weren't safely in your arms. And those are all things that you'll observe from her behavior. Okay, anything to add, Susan?
No, just that we're going to go over some body language stuff after the break, and that might give you some ammunition for making those decisions. So now we're going to talk a little bit about sort of what your dog might be experiencing on the inside. And this is going to be kind of a real brief exploration of this. Like we said earlier, any one of these topics we could be spending hours on, but we just want you guys to have a sense of what's happening with your dog. And so a lot of times people will say, you might have heard this phrase before, and that is when your dog is, barking and lunging and doing all those things that, embarrass us or upset us, or, and it's like your dog isn't giving you a hard time. They're having a hard time. And they literally are having a hard time. There is all this great, emotional, hormonal, neurological stuff kind of going on inside their body and their brain that that makes them feel like they're keeping themselves safe. And we're just going to very briefly go over that and sort of what the upshot of that is. So the first one is they're having an emotional response, just like we would have an emotional response over something that authentically worries them or worried them. Decades ago, we used to think, oh, they don't have emotions. They're just these sort of blobs, But man, we know now they have many of the same emotions that we do, maybe even some different ones than we do. Maybe we have some that they don't have. But we certainly know that they experience fear and anxiety and worry and concern. In addition to happiness and excitement and joy and all those kind of good things. So be assured your dog is having an authentic response to the thing that worries them. The next thing is there's a hormonal response. When they get upset, when they have this emotional response, it's like it's like stress hormones are real. I don't know if you've ever been in an accident or anything like that, but it's like, or had someone, like I've actually had someone try and rob me, it's like your stress hormones are like zzz for, it seems like for hours, certainly, those don't go away. And the same thing for your dog. Those don't go away for a while. There's some discussion about, do these stress hormones after they've had a, big barking experience or a lunging experience or a fearful experience, do these go away in a couple of hours or is it a couple of days? There's different people say different things, but just know that feeling of stress is still coursing through their body for quite a while afterwards. And then there's, of course, the neurological response. It's this response to something that worries them is part of their autonomic sympathetic systems, meaning they're not really thinking about it. It just happens automatically. There's little to no conscious thought associated with it. They're not choosing to behave this way. Their brain and body are simply reacting within milliseconds to defend itself. And this is why it's so hard once our dogs have kind of gone over that cliff. It's really hard to kind of get them back. And our goal, we're going to be talking pretty soon about ways to keep them from going over that cliff. Because a lot of times once they go over that cliff, a lot of things have happened. And so this is why sort of, trying to rationalize with them, or, yelling at them, or, pulling on the leash or something can sometimes actually make things worse. So, but then Marnie's now going to talk a little bit about sort of, so what happens when all of these responses gather?
Yeah. So the responses that Susan was talking about, they're reflexive behaviors. They're on board. They're not things that your dog they're not choosing to have that emotional, neurological, hormonal response. It's just a physiological response. And so they do. But what happens is those behaviors that come out of what's happening with them, that initially is reflexive, it's not thought, it's kind of organic. They begin to realize that when they do those things, they're achieving their goals. They're meeting their need of making, the scary thing go away, if you will. One example. And as a result, because dogs are way too smart, they begin to identify that what they were doing made the thing that they wanted to have happen. And so what had been a reflexive response becomes a learned response that they then use to, make the thing go away. So it starts organically, and then it becomes this thing where they're like, oh yeah, totally worked. I'm going to do that again. So punishing that response, or even training a new one, still doesn't address the underlying issue that's going on for our dogs. And so we want to address the underlying need or problem. It's going to be a more successful solution. It's going to be better for our dogs, and it's going to be better for us, because we're not always going to be pushing back against this thing, but rather we're going to be building a different response, helping our dogs build a different response, and setting them up to be more comfortable in these situations. And when our, just kind of one final phrase, when our dog is doing these things, and Susan, you may have already said this, but we want to believe them. This is real. This is real for them. They're not doing it to tick us off. They're having a real authentic response. So we want to listen to that and address that. And one of the ways we can do that is by paying attention to their body language. So body language is how our dogs tell us what's going on. It'll give us indications so that we can take these clues into account, and we can then support them. It lets us know it's about to get real, about to get too hard, or maybe it already is too hard. And so the body language helps us key in on that. And we're going to be looking further in the webinar in what specifics we can do to support them. But we also want to know, when do we act to support them? Ideally, we do it before it gets too hard. We don't want to be spending all our time escaping the difficult situation. We want to recognize this may begin to be a little bit too hard. So we're going to use the things we've learned, our understanding of body language, to keep everybody in their success zone, if you will. So I'm going to go ahead and play this video. It's by Go Anywhere Dog. At the bottom of the slide, you'll see a link to her video online, which has even a bit more kind of lead in and lead out than you'll be seeing in the webinar. But we're going to take a look at the body language video and then come back and talk about it. love that she has that palate cleanser at the end. Yeah, after all of that, oh my gosh. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, I encourage you, especially if a lot of this is new information, to take advantage of the link and go back and look at some of the body language indicators again, in your own time. Uh, One of the things you may notice is a lot of those body language indicators, they're things that we'll see perhaps, coupled with a soft bendy dog, or a dog may actually yawn when they're sleepy. So a lot of those body language indicators where you're going, but wait, doesn't my dog do that, are out of context. That's sniffing. All of a sudden your dog begins to sniff where you weren't necessarily near a great scent. So keep that in mind, and keep those body language indicators in mind so that you can get ahead of it, so that you see when things are beginning to be too hard for your dog. The more that you watch canine body language, the harder it is not to see what's going on, which is the good news. And you want to see trouble brewing before the explosion happens. We've got some more resources for you here. There are certainly plenty more, but these are ones that we're really comfortable recommending. The first is a book called Doggy Language. It's by artist Lily Chin. Some of you may be familiar with her already. And every time I look at dog body language, I have to give her a shout out, because the book is so simple. It's kid friendly. It's adult friendly. She is an animator, and so draws animations, and as well as her books. And so she really observes body language, movement, with a keen eye, but she presents it in these really simple illustrations that are spot on in terms of, the science, if you will. So don't hesitate. Go get Doggy Language by Lily Chin. Share it with your friends and your kids. And then Fear Free Happy Homes. It's a free resource. They have a number of resources, handouts, graphics, as well as videos on a number of things to help our dogs be comfortable in a variety of situations. And that's a link to their video on body language basics. The American Kennel Club has put together, I think they list 7 things to look for in body language. It's really simple, but it's a great place to start. And for those of us who don't like to be inundated with a lot of detail from the get-go, it's a great source. The Child and Dog Interaction Guide by Trailblazing Tales. This is, again, a great resource if you have kids in your home or in your life, and dogs, or if you expect to meet kids with your dogs. This is great to look at. Silent Conversations website, it goes into some depth there. They have illustrations. I don't think they have photos. I may be mistaken on that. And then the Preventive Vets group on human body language, what we do, where we stand, how we interact with our dogs, with other dogs. That is a big player. And so I love that they've put that resource together. All right, Susan, what shall we do about this?
Okay, so pretty much I think for the rest of the presentation, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty about, so what do we do about this? We kind of know what's going on. We know how to recognize it. We we understand that there are certain things that can exacerbate our dog's behaviors, but what the heck do we do about it? So we're going to split this up into 2 sections. The first section is what can you do in advance? Meaning when you have the time and the space and the brain power, you'll be able to practice. We're going to, later on, we're going to, actually just in a few minutes, we're going to go over a handful of things that if you practice when you and your dog are chilling out, relaxing, then the more you practice these things, the easier they will be able to, you can call on them in the moment, which is our second sort of section. So we have in advance stuff, and then we have in the moment stuff. We're going to go over in advance here first. And again, these are mostly things that you can do. I was actually thinking about it this morning. Sometimes when we have a dog who, does embarrassing things, ask me how I know, behaves in ways that we wish that they wouldn't behave in. That sort of colors our whole day. When you think about it, generally that's, even if, just, everything is going wrong on every walk you take or something, it's usually like 10 minutes or 20 minutes a day or something. And you've got that whole rest of the day when you and your dog are kind of together and feeling good about things and can focus, you can practice these things. And all these things that we're going to have you guys practice, you can practice them for a minute, each day or something. I mean, so in advance, we can, of course, what we just talked about, really become the expert on your dog's body language. That will help you so much because you will see trouble brewing and you'll be able to take action. The other thing is, as Marnie, I think, mentioned, believe them. When your dog is, sort of practice, believing your dog. It sounds like such a silly thing, but sometimes, and I mean, even people like me, it's like, I've been working with dogs for quite a while. It's like, I see a dog do something or my own dogs do something, and I just think, oh, come on, no, this is just ridiculous, but it's like, believe them when they tell you something is not right for them. Give them agency, meaning give them choice in what they might do. If they want to, not go down this street for whatever reason, it's like, just like, okay, fine, we'll go down this street. Or they feel uncomfortable doing this. It's like, fine, no problem. We'll try something else. And then the next thing is training these skills that you and your dog will be able to perform when you really need them to happen. Okay. So we like to train when we don't need the skill to happen, so that when we do need the skill to happen, that can actually work for us. And then the last thing is develop and implement a management plan to set you and your dog up for success. And you might hear a lot of trainers talk about management. This is our secret weapon. I will just tell you this. This is basically just when you are not actively training, you are working to make sure that your dog doesn't have a chance to practice that behavior that you don't like. So take it away, Marnie.
All right. And I'm doing that just now, tossing treats so my dog doesn't bark at the squirrel in the backyard while I talk about management.
Yes, we have management going on here too.
Yeah. So with management, we adjust the environment. So the environment is the physical environment, and that's a big thing in this case. But we adjust, and it can also include our distance from a thing that's a trigger that sets our dogs off. We just change it up so that our dog doesn't feel the need for drama, for a big dramatic response. And some examples are, for many dogs, if they meet a visitor to the home outside first, that changes things. It's different from having a visitor enter the home. We'll be looking at visitors to the home a little bit more later. For a dog who, kind of really doesn't much like visitors, or finds their arrival difficult, or you're in the middle of a blizzard, so meeting visitors outside first is not really a factor, have your dog in a separate room when visitors come. Adjust your distance from people outside. This is huge. And it's really easy for us to forget how powerful this is. But if, let's say my dog 2 blocks away or across the street can see a man in a parka and not lose his stuff. But, if we're crossing the street toward the man in the parka or vice versa, the dog is not coping, then that tells us, okay, we're going to start working across the street. And if we know the man in the parka, we might ask him to put his hood down, first to make it easier. So these are all management things. And then we can create non-threatening visual blocks for our car or our home. That can be, if your dog practices going, get off my lawn, through the window all day long, you can get top down, bottom up shades so that you don't have to live in a cave, but your dog doesn't see what's out there. Or you can get window film, or maybe at the time that things your dog finds threatening are likely to be going by, your dog just doesn't have access to that room then. So there are a lot of things that if we think ahead can be pretty simple. And of course, in this photo, we have a a cute Shiba who seems really happy to be behind a baby gate. And so again, that part of your management plan. What to do in the moment. So we were looking at in advance. So a lot of these things we're going to be looking at doing in the moment. We actually want to practice them in advance, but we have them here at in the moment so that you can kind of see where you might use them, where you might implement them. So when surprised, you're out and all of a sudden someone comes around the corner in a parka. It's winter. We're going to have a blizzard. That's why I've got parkas on the brain. So, someone comes around the corner, they're dressed in a way that your dog's going, oh my gosh, scary monster. We can ask them to move away. We want to practice this before it happens, though. We want to practice in our head what's going to happen. There's a blind corner and, people come around all the time. We want to be comfortable ourselves in doing that. And then we want to look at how we might move away. Again, these are things we're going to train before we need them, make them fun games for our dogs, but then we can implement them in the moment. So I'm going to go ahead. We've got, again, a URL, so you can go back when you get the slides and watch them. These are really just short, really short videos of 3 of my favorite things to implement. If everybody did this, I'd be out of a job. No question. Susan, you might be out of a job too.
Yes.
So the first one we're going to take a look at is our U-turns. Trigger, dog trigger warning. There may be barking in that video, and there certainly is barking in the next video. So just, if your dog's present and is going to react to barks, you may want to go under headphones. So the first video, really short, we're going to look at U-turns. Just several practices of U-turns in the yard with my dog. Hey, there are captions. So I'm going to talk over a little bit too. Walking up the leash, you notice how I gathered the leash to get to his shoulder. When you are 6 feet behind your dog, 4 feet, when you're just at your dog's tail, you do not have the influence to help them figure out that they want to move away. So you can see I'm gathering up the leash, moving to his shoulder, putting fabulous food at his nose, and guiding him in a runaway. I don't know why I don't use the same cue here, but there we go. Gather up the leash, go to his shoulder, treat to his nose, move him away. That was it. Practice that couple times a walk, and you're going to be in great shape. Notice it was taught as a fun game. We absolutely want it to be a fun game. They don't know it's not a game if we don't tell them. So I'm going to just go ahead and just play the next video. So this is the backup recall. And this is actually the version that I'm showing you is based on a group of games developed by Leslie McDevitt, who developed the Control Unleashed series of books and approach to working with dogs. It's a fabulous approach. This is my own kind of riff on her attention games, doing an out and back, which again is a great way to teach a dog to come to me and to move with me as I move backwards. And yeah, I warned you about the barking dog. And we're in a windstorm, who doesn't do training videos in the windstorm? So I'm tossing a treat away for him to go and get. When he turns back, I click. You can say yes if you don't use it. And so I'm rewarding him. I'm telling him yes. Every time he turns back to me, he hears a sound that says, that's a fabulous thing. Always followed by food. Toss a treat away again. He turns back to me. I'm adding a little bit of my movement, and you can see how my moving backwards makes him even more interested in coming to me. And that's what we call a backup recall. It's again, a great game And so now if I kind of look at him in that certain way, he absolutely comes running because that backup recall game is so much fun for him. Practiced when nothing's happening, it makes it really powerful when things are happening. But we build the skill when nothing's happening. And then the final video is find it.
Marnie, I'm going to jump in real quick because it's
Sure.
kind of relevant to the last video. A couple of people are asking, what is the coupler looking attachment that you were using to attach to your harness?
Oh, okay. Carrie, let me come to that question after we look at the find it video, if
Okay.
that would be okay. And I'll go back to that video and touch on that. But that's great. Thanks for pointing that out. Okay, so this final video, and then we'll come back and look at that harness because I love gear. I love to talk about what my dog wears. And this is crazy simple game. All we do is we say find it and we toss a treat. One of the key things is that we don't show our treat before we say find it because we want the words to be meaningful so that when I say find it, my dog begins searching. So I'm going to go ahead and play this and then we'll come back to the leash. So there are 3 different ways we can use this. We can use it to bring our dog to us. Say find it, drop a treat at your feet. I hasten to point out this game is so powerful, my dog has come so that I will give him treats because he hears the computer saying find it. I say find it, I toss a treat away. It is a great way to move my dog away. It's also a fun way to change their attention. And then it's great to move your dog with you. This game does rely on having food on us, but it's a very predictable, specific pattern. All right. So I'm going to go back to the slides, going to take a look at the questions in chat about the leash, and then probably go back to that video and show you. There we go. Okay, so there are 2 versions of this. Those of you with extra sharp eyes may have caught. Fleetwood is in what's called a T-Touch. That's kind of the brand, and Harmony harness. It is a harness that frees the shoulders. I love it. It's what we call an H-style harness. And it has a clip point in the back and a clip point in the front. And he is on a leash. That's probably an 8-foot leash when it's just a single extension, might be 9, with a handle that's floating on the leash. There's a ring, it's a parachute ring. You can get them off Amazon, metal ring, and I've got a separate handle that clips on. And what that does is it changes the balance of power, if you will. It changes what my dog experiences when they're on the harness, because a single point of contact is in some ways a more intrusive kind of pressure on our dogs, a more triggering pressure than this, where it's attached front and back. It's different. Even if I didn't have the floating handle, it would be different. I would be less likely to pull my dog physically out of balance, and he would be less likely to pull himself out of balance. The floating handle takes some getting used to. I love the floating handle, but what it takes getting used to is that we don't have that strong pull against our dogs, and we're really used to that. We're used to feeling our dog pull against the leash, and we're used to pulling back on the leash. Our goal is that we not do that, because as we touched on earlier, that sudden leash pressure, that can be really triggering for our dogs. A dog who's like kind of keeping it together can all of a sudden go off when they feel that sudden leash pressure. So this is one leash arrangement. If you go to ttouch.ca, there's also ttouch.com, but the Canadian website has some better photos. Go to the shop and do a search on Harmony harness. They'll show you kind of the whole system, if you will, but you can see what that looks like. So the coupler, sharp eyes that you caught that as well, is another thing that comes out of T-Touch. So you've seen the double-ended leash there. The coupler is just like a short version of that, if you will. You can just get a coupler and do this yourself, but there we go. Let me see if I can, yeah. Sharp eyes, folks. Black coupler against a black dog. So this is like a little strap. Again, it clips to the front and back of the harness, but I can put any leash on a floating ring that's built into the coupler. It is called a T-Touch connector. So it's also on the website. A standard leash coupler doesn't have a floating ring. It has a rigid point of attachment. Even so, I find it a superior solution to a single point of contact with a dog who, who pulls. But with this, the ring floats. Again, we get used to not having that pressure, which is great when we get used to it and our dog gets used to it. It takes a little bit of practice for us to be comfortable with it. And so I recommend practicing in your yard if you have one, in your house. And Charlotte, great question. What is the difference between the Harmony harness and the Freedom No Pull harness? Freedom harness is really available. Freedom harness is really hard to go to a pet store and not be able to get it. It has a clip front and back. It has a little velveteen strap that goes around the body, so that's nice. The thing about the Freedom harness that makes it my second or third harness that I recommend, and not the first one, is that the strap that goes around the chest goes over the top of the shoulders. With the T-Touch harness, it frees the shoulders. So the strap is up here, whereas with the Freedom harness, it goes over the top of the leg bones. That may not be a big issue for your dog. If they're not pulling hard, no big deal. If it's not changing their gait, no big deal. For dogs with rounded chests, the Freedom harness is a really good fit. For a dog, kind of a leaner dog, the way Fleetwood is built, the Harmony harness is a better fit. The Balance harness, just spelled the way it sounds. You can do a search on it. You can also find that at a lot of pet stores as well. The Balance harness is very, very similar to the T-Touch harness, except that it's longer in the body. So for some dogs, it's a great choice. Dachshund Balance harness is probably better than a T-Touch harness, or at least as good. For a dog with a shorter body, it may hit a tickle spot, the back strap. All right. Susan, anything to add?
No, except I love the T-Touch harness,
Oh, I
and
do too,
yeah, and the connector and the floating handle are really, really nice.
Yeah, they're well worth getting used to.
Yeah.
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 And so this guy, he's often good just on a collar with a leash in a lot of situations. But if I'm going anywhere that I think he's going to find even mildly challenging, 100% he's in a harness points
Yeah.
of contact, because it's more comfortable for both of us. Yeah. All right. Great questions.
Let me talk a little bit about these in the moment setups.
Yeah.
So there are what we might call setups, which we can do sort of, as I like to call it, in the wild. Not in your home or not, but it's like you're outside generally, it doesn't have to be outside, but you're outside, and either the situation presents itself or you've planned it, you've planned ahead, that you're going to practice a little bit of desensitization and counter conditioning, which you might have heard some trainers kind of toss that phrase around. It's basically just doing some various things to help the dog feel differently about the thing that bothers them, change their mind, change their feelings about it. And as with so much of the stuff that we're working on, that we kind of have mentioned this before, but these setups need to be set up at a distance from the trigger, the stranger, whatever, that your dog finds worrisome. Because as we talked about earlier, you can't get any training done if your dog's head is exploding. You just can't. I don't know, maybe there's a trainer out there who's better than I am, but it just literally physiologically, it does not work.
Yeah.
So we always want to do these things at a distance where the dog can be relatively thoughtful, relatively relaxed, you know? They don't have to be totally chilled out, as you'll see in some of the I've got a couple videos here. But anyway, one of the first ones, well, let me just talk really quickly about where you can do this. I mean, there's a world of places you can do this. You can do this at the far end of a shopping center parking lot, either in your car or outside of your car, far end of a parking lot at a park, you know, where there's a nearby national park for me, and they've got tons of parking. And that's a great place for me to do this with my dog, because I can get some nice distance from people and other dogs, and get a lot of good practice in. You can even do it standing in your backyard, looking out over the sidewalk, or inside your home, looking through the door or a window. But you know, sitting on the front steps. But again, only if those are places where your dog can see the trigger and not completely lose their mind. They're aware of it. They might be sort of maybe a little huffy, you know, but they have to be thoughtful. So the first one that I really love is, it goes by a lot of different names. We're going to call it here, Watch the World Go By. And when I explain to clients sometimes what this is about, they're like, that's it. It is almost as easy as playing Find It with your dog. And all it is sitting at a distance with your dog and hanging out and letting your dog watch things in the world go by and just process them. That processing is incredibly valuable. So we have a couple videos. I don't know if we want to watch one or both, the first one I think is the in the park.
Yeah.
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 And this is from probably, we were there for maybe about 10 minutes. Again, these things don't have to last a long time. We were sitting on some benches. There was a baseball game with lots of people running around, lots of people yelling, you know, moving in erratic ways. But we were probably a good 50 yards away. And you see, my dog is looking at it, and every once in a while he looks at something else.
Yawn.
He's just hanging out. There's a little yawn there, which might be you know, it's kind of hard, you know, it's like there's stuff going on. But he's pretty thoughtful, you know, he checks in with me. He's sniffing the ground now. You can see he's going to start digging for stuff. There's probably something alive down there. But literally, we sat there for maybe 10 minutes, and then we continued on our walk. And this is so valuable. I cannot tell you how this really helped him. He was probably about 2 years old here, because I'd say in the first 2 years of his life, he was sort of debating, shall I be a dog who's going to be reactive to people and other dogs? or should I just be, you know, a dog? So he was kind of weighing those options. And I thought, yeah, let's let you process, you know, some stuff at a distance. So cool. Should we look at do you want to look at the next one?
Yeah, I find the next one fascinating. I hope others do as well.
Yes. Okay. This one was roughly around the same time. We are sitting in the back of our car with the gate open. It's raining, actually. We're at the edge of a grocery store. There's a fair amount of stuff going on. There's you might be able to hear the rumble of a truck nearby, a delivery truck. There are people kind of going by with grocery carts. There are cars going by. There's rain. And you can see he is, and when I say processing, we are, again, at a distance where his nervous system isn't going, it's going, there's stuff out there. And you can really see him smelling, looking, and thinking. And that's what we want. We want our dogs to start to be able to see things at a distance, and think about them and not have that big response. That if they continue to have that big response over and over again, that becomes the default. And this is sort of an initial step on that not being the default. And I think we were here for maybe 4 minutes, literally. And then we just were like, okay, time to go home.
Yeah.
And when he was young, young, I say 2 years old, he was an adolescent. So he was a handful. He was debating, yeah, am I going to cause some trouble here? Or am I going to not, am I going to be able to process this stuff? So I just helped him with this a little bit. Okay, so the next one that we really love goes by a number of names as well. Look at that, click for looking, engage, disengage. At its most simple form, again, you are at a distance, you're setting yourself up so that you and your dog, so your dog can perceive things that closer up might worry them. They're at a distance, and when they look at that thing, you're going to mark it by either a click, if you are a clicker person, or you can say yes, or you can just say any word that means, hey, looking at that thing is awesome, and you're about to get a snack. So your dog will begin to learn that, oh, I look at that person, I hear my person say yes, I look back and I get a snack. It gives them something to do. It begins to give them a little bit of autonomy and agency over what's happening. And you can go further with this protocol, but let's just look at the beginning steps of this protocol.
So the first phase is engage. We are marker training, so that means we're using the word yes and following with a treat, or you're using a clicker. We can use this for dog frustration, or we can use it for fear, or if you just don't know what it is but your dog reacts. This can be used for anything that triggers your dog. Always be consistent. Every trigger or potential trigger means that you execute the training. Focus on your timing. You want to mark and feed within 1 to 2 seconds of your dog noticing that trigger. Don't forget, be consistent. Make sure that your dog has the space needed and is under threshold. Tess waits for Alvin to notice the dog before she marks yes and feeds. Her hands are in a neutral position, which means they're not reaching until after she's used her marker word of yes. So Alvin always looks back at the trigger, she marks yes, and feeds. This prevents a reaction, but also we've got a consistent set of training that we're putting into place when he sees a dog. Once you have been successful working on phase 1 with your dog, you can move to phase 2, the disengage.
Yeah, there's a second phase, but I always tell people, if you stay in phase 1 for the rest of your dog's life, that is a thing of beauty.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. So again, it's basically done at a distance. Dog looks at something, you mark, they turn back, they get fed. If they are unable to disengage from looking at that thing that worries them, that is the message to you, human, I am too close. You need to help me out. We need to either end the session or go back further. Okay.
Susan, would you say that when folks go back and look at the whole video, that in fact their dog's going to tell them when they're ready for phase 2?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Sometimes we find that people are too much in a hurry to get to phase 2, but let your dog tell you when it's working for them, when it's really working for them. So,
Yeah.
Okay.
All
So
right.
we're going to do visitors at the home.
There was one question that I wondered if you wanted to take.
Oh.
The final
Oh.
one about in the social processing clips.
Yeah.
How do you decide when to end it? How often would you do something like this before expecting to see the dog relax more?
I guess I'm always looking at his body language. I mean, that's the only way he can tell me is, we've been here 5 minutes. Is this a good place to stop? I try not to be a greedy trainer. Frequently I am. And my dog lets me know, but generally again, this is where the body, really understanding body language. But honestly, with things like this, I feel like less is more. So the first thing you saw was probably about 10 minutes because we were a long way away from what was going on. So he could sort of, fiddle around with stuff, he could check out things. The second one in the back of the car, that was probably about 4 minutes. I don't think I'd do anything longer than 10 to 15, to be honest with you, unless your dog is, I don't know, asleep or something. But then at that point, they're not social processing, right? They're asleep. And as far as before I expect to see the dog relax more, I was very happy with Augie's sort of being able to just hang out with me. I did not, again, I'm not asking him for any behavior here. I'm not expecting him to like lay down or sit or do anything like that. This is all, he's on a leash, but I'm like, you're on a leash as long as you look comfortable and you're hanging out with me and it doesn't look like you're about to tip over into that over arousal. That is perfectly wonderful for me. So.
And Susan, would it be fair to say that when you did the setup, you were in a position where you could leave immediately if it got to be too much?
Definitely with the park, because I could just stand up and walk away.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of don't ever want, I do. I pay attention to like what's behind me, what's to the side of me. I don't want to get trapped per se. Sitting in the car, kind of the way we were, now that I look back on it, that might have been a little trickier to get out. But if I had been sitting in the car with like the doors closed, that would have been easier, right? Because I could just start the car up and leave. So yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Do we want to take this one or do we want to go further? Do you think there's from Charlotte? I mean, I senior and younger dogs. I mean, it depends on the dog. I mean, I can tell you my 14-year-old dog was still learning things almost until the day he died.
Yeah.
So I don't ever stop training my dogs.
Yeah.
As long as they're having a good time and enjoying themselves, that training goes on.
Okay. In the moment. So when we talk about when you can plan ahead, but in the moment, you're like, isn't that contradictory? But no, we're going to train when the thing is happening, but we have planned, we have managed the environment, we have practiced the needed skills in advance. And so now we're ready to have a moment, but it's a moment for which we've planned. The first two videos are actually were put together by our colleague Sarah Stoikas, doing a setup to show first how we get the dog, whose name is Hope, to have the skill and have it front of brain to deal with the fact that a visitor is coming to the home. And the dog you'll see in these videos, Hope, does have stranger danger. And again, we have the YouTube links so that you can go back to them if you like. So this is where Hope is practicing. Liz is her person. Practicing relax on a mat with Hope. So she's got a mat. She's a little bit of a Cliff Notes version of introducing Hope to the fact that the mat's fabulous. So no visitors are there. Hope's not on a leash. The mat's on the floor. All this happening is treats are being produced on the mat. And you'll notice that Liz is not feeding from her hand. The mat is the magic mat. I think, Susan, you call it the magic carpet. So, treats are going on the mat. So that gives value to the mat.
On your mat?
All right. And now she's practicing entering the room with Hope on leash to go to the mat, exactly the path she would take and the location of the mat when a visitor comes. So they're practicing this skill that's going to be needed when a visitor comes. Again, the treats are going Hope's a little bit forward on the mat, but the treats are still going on the floor. It's all about we're down, we're relaxed. It's not about my dog boring eye holes in my forehead. It's about my dog relaxing. There we go. And you can see a little bit, she's coming in from behind the couch. So the couch will ultimately provide a bit of a visual and physical block, taking Hope to the mat. Doing that same thing again and again. You know, what's not to love? I lie on the mat and I get to eat good stuff.
Let's go.
And Hope like, no, I don't want to leave the mat. This is way too cool. One more repetition. Yeah. And again, you'll notice, you may be noticing Hope's body language. She's so happy to be on the mat, but she's a little bit easier in her body than she was. So Hope has practiced where to go, what to do when the visitor comes. Now, disclaimer, the visitor is a person that Hope has met before, so she's not a total stranger. And nothing bad has happened with Hope and this person, so Hope is way more receptive than she would be if someone she didn't know came to the house. But you'll see how Liz lets the visitor in while Hope is not present at the door. We've got no door drama. There will be a bark, so, trigger warning for your dogs. And then the visitor comes in. The visitor is parked sitting. Human sitting is, I think, 9 times out of 10, the easiest posture for us to be in, for our dogs to be less uncomfortable with that. And then Liz will enter with Hope the same path that you've seen practice. So let me go ahead and play this. Oh, I didn't need to say all that. We have captions. Yeah. So.
Hi, Debbie.
Hi.
And comes in, no dog off screen barking.
Have a seat.
How are you doing?
I'm good. Here, let me go get Hope. Yeah, have a seat. I'll be right back.
Okay. So the visitor is parked, if you will.
Yeah.
And notice she's actually also facing away from where Hope is coming in. That's not a bad thing. So we're not doing the eye stare, the square posture. She's just kind of easily looking away. Hope and Liz follow the exact same path, do the exact same thing in terms of placement. She's rewarding Hope for being on the mat. Okay, now, the game, this is like a version of engage, disengage. Every time Hope looks at the visitor, Liz clicks. If you don't do clicker training, you could say, yes, you want a unique sound that says that thing you're doing, that's great. And it's earning you this treat. Hope looks at the visitor, Liz clicks, Hope gets a great treat. So we're making it very consistent. That thing you're doing, keeping your brain in your head, looking at the stranger, that's great. That's a behavior that I will pay for. Couple of disclaimers. They are way closer than you're likely to do the first time out. This is successful for Hope because she has met this person before and is not out of her brain. This would be way too close for a lot of dogs with stranger danger. So just so you know, let's say, for example, the dog worries, maybe family member is standing back there in the corner, way behind. That might be more successful for your dog. Okay. So again, we're not asking anything of Hope. The visitor is not moving toward her, is not reaching out toward her. She's simply quietly sitting at first and then eventually moving. My first time with a new person visiting the home, I probably would take the dog away before they had to get up from the couch. It's all about, training in the moment, planning ahead, but also doing some management as well, setting it up so it's going to be a really successful situation and we're not setting our dog up for drama. Take a quick look. Something showed up in chat. Okay, so Katie, great question. Any steps between having the guest actually in the home and further distance in the same room? Yeah, you could do a version of this outside, meeting outside, be at a distance from the guest where your dog is like, oh, there's a person, but I'm at a distance. I'm comfortable with that. And you could do exactly the dog looking at the person, hearing a click or a yes, and getting a fabulous treat again and again and again, just like in the engage, disengage video that Susan showed us. Between the guest in the home and further distance in the same room. You could have the dog in an adjacent room and, where maybe they can kind of see the visitor, know the visitor's there, and play this same game. Wherever geographically your dog can think. Also, the video was a couple of minutes. I wouldn't go much longer than that when you're training a dog who really worries about visitors. And less is more. So we look at the distance, how far away are they? We look at the duration, how long are we going? We look at the difficulty, what's the visitor doing? Initially sitting, facing away from them side to them is usually easiest for the dog. So great question. There's one other video I want to take a look at. I hope your eyeballs are not going flat at this point from watching all these videos. This is a game, we call it the treat toss game. The video we're looking at is based loosely on Suzanne Clothier's treat retreat, but we call it treat toss because it's probably not according to Hoyle, if you will. It's probably not, Clothier's protocol, but it is certainly based on that. And what happens in this video, I'm going to actually talk over the video because it's really simple, pretty easy to see what's going on, and going to put the sound down. It's kind of annoying new age music. I like new age, but not this one. So we've got the blonde woman on the left is not the dog's person. Now, this video is made in a shelter setting, so the dog is in a shelter, but does have a relationship with the brunette woman. You'll see the dog check in with her from time to time during this video, and clearly the dog started in that position. So in this case, I'll start playing and talk about it. So the blonde woman is not facing the dog directly, not making direct eye contact. Again, she's sitting kind of aside toward where the dog is. She sort of looks over, can see the dog, but she's not fixating on making eye contact. That can be really triggering for many dogs. Imagine if you grew up with siblings and had a staring contest. That's pretty triggering. So she is throwing a treat in a way that's not threatening. She's kind of, underhand, flicking the treat a little bit, not an overhand throw, throwing the treat past the dog. So she's not luring the dog to her. She is giving the dog kind of double reinforcement. The dog's getting a treat and the dog is getting extra distance. For a dog who worries about stuff, distance from the thing they're worried about is part of the reward. So you'll see the dog, who was more crouched at the beginning, is getting a little bit more upright. Just finally noticed the camera. Getting a little bit more upright, moving closer to the person to go, is that going to happen again? Which is great. The dog doesn't want to meet her, doesn't want to be BFFs, but is finding that, the person has done nothing scary. All she's done is throw treats. And that begins to kind of change the emotional response and create a positive interaction. If the blonde woman were to lure the dog to her with a great treat, what happens is the dog's going to go, oh, I really want that. Oh, that treat. Oh, it smells so good. I really want it. Gets there, eats the treat, and then is like, oh no, now I am right next to the scary monster. This was not my plan. So we don't want to put our dogs in over our head, and doing that luring with the treats can do that. So, even if the dog had come up, I would probably, with a dog who is a little cautious or jumpy, I would probably quietly toss a treat away. Dog checks in with a person, that, like, is this okay? Is this okay? Oh, okay. I guess it is okay. And then goes back. And if you notice, the dog is starting the game. There's a lot of agency for the dog here. I look at the blonde woman and, oh my gosh, I can make her toss a treat. So, so we're not asking anything of the dog that the dog is not consenting to immediately. Yeah. Okay. So you may find that, and I have found that this is a great approach, but I like starting with the engage, disengage first, where the dog and their guardian are working together at a distance that the dog's comfortable with before I ask them to be comfortable with me tossing a treat. All right. So I do love all three of these approaches. So let's move on, and then we're going to be able to get to questions very quickly.
Yeah.
Susan.
Zip through this.
Yeah.
So just a really quick overview of some things that we humans can do for ourselves. If we're holding our breath, and I don't know about you, but when I'm trying something new, learning something new, working hard with my dog, sometimes I find myself holding my breath. These are all kind of things to kind of help us breathe easier around our dogs when we might be tempted to suck in our breath. One of them is just practice breathing around your dog when you've got them on a leash or on a walk or something. Just pay attention to your breath. The next one is something called a Mr. Rogers hack, which will include the little handout for this. Super simple, super fun. If you are basically narrating the world for your dog. So if you're walking your dog and maybe they hear something, or maybe way down the street they see, some neighbor or something like that, you can say, oh yeah, that's Jack. I think what he's doing is walking his kids to school. So you're just basically connecting with your dog, telling him what's going on. And I swear to God, eventually our dogs, because I did this before I knew about this Mr. Rogers hack. I think our dogs pay attention to what we say, and they begin to recognize patterns in our language. And it's like, oh, she knows who that person is. It's like, well, maybe I don't need to be too worried about him. Yeah. And it keeps you from doing the dreaded, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, which for most dogs, that gets them jacked up even more, because the only time you say it's okay is when it's not okay.
So we're lying.
Yes, you're lying, human. So, which brings us to sing to your dog, sing with your dog. If you're singing to your dog, sounds silly, but if you're singing to your dog, you have to be breathing. It's really hard to hold your breath and sing. I did this a lot with Augie when we were getting in a car and driving, because he was a little agitated about being in a car. And so he would just hear me sing, and eventually he'd be just like, oh, okay, fine, everything's fine. She's breathing, she's singing, whatever. And then something that is just sort of a general thing that you might notice, it's sort of a theme of what we've been talking about here, not entirely, but anytime you're in doubt, move with your dog. Get the hell out of Dodge. Play find it, whatever. A dog who is sitting, or who's being asked to sit, who's being restrained, is a dog that frequently is not going to feel comfortable. They're not going to feel like they have a whole lot of power over their safety. And I see too often in my neighborhood, dogs starting to react and then people saying, sit, 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 sit. And you really want to think twice about that because the dog is hearing you and they're a little freaked out because they're like, I really want to make my person happy, but the last thing I want to do is be kind of attached to the ground while something scary is going by. So just think about that for a moment. So cool. Okay. And then I think we're just going to go on to just a little bit of do this and not that. So
Exactly.
yeah.
But first, this is a Marnie and
yeah.
Susan quote. We started
Yes.
we
Yeah.
started with the famous person quote, and now this is our quote, which is remember, anything you rely on in the moment needs to be practiced often in advance. So, just a little bit of a do this, not that. Someone came out with a diet book a while ago, eat this, not that. So it's just kind of the same concept. And we just want to touch on this and then get to your questions and get to your own do this, not that. So the first thing is run away rather than restraining the dog. And, I would fully expect this dog to go off, restrained as he is with the collar pressure. Let's do a U-turn, a backup recall, or a find it that we will have already practiced with them. So they're going to be fluent in that.
And the same idea. It's like, instead of sort of, having someone reach towards your dog or try to lure your dog towards them, or we sort of try and lure our dogs towards somebody. It's like you can play find it with your dog while maybe there's somebody nearby. Again, your dog is busy doing something. They're moving. They're expending a little bit of energy. For most dogs that have a little bit of anxiety, that can really, really help. They're busy. They're looking at the ground. They're sniffing.
Third one, give your dog agency. So we've touched on this a lot, and I think you guys really kind of, grabbed onto that, which is fabulous. It's reflected in your questions. And one example, play the treat toss game instead of letting a stranger reach into your dog's space. The stranger can do the treat toss, or you can do the treat toss, or a find it. Your turn. Be thinking about, especially with this information, new to many of you, what are you going to do instead of something that maybe hasn't been working? Think ahead. And I loved these photos of the dogs when I found them because, so clearly, one guy is like, I love my life. And the other guy is like, oh my gosh. So, all right. So
Super.
let's go back to your questions.
I think
ahead.
Cynthia's might have been the next one. How do you do this with a dog that has an excessively high prey drive for anything that moves? And once he has zoomed on anything, I don't have any idea how to get his mind back. This actually kind of applies to anything you're doing with your dog. It's like, how do you do this with a dog that's, really motion sensitive? There are a lot of ways to approach this. And it's depending on your dog. It's like, a lot of it is really getting to try and figure out how far away do I need to be before before I can teach my dog something. Okay. Suzanne, I'm going to steal this, but Suzanne Clothier has that think and learn zone before
Right.
your dog is in that think and learn zone. So my examples might not work for your dog. Okay. The 50 yards away from people running around and screaming, that might still be too close for you and your dog. And it sounds ridiculous. So sometimes I will play around with, so can we, experiment with different intensities. So maybe instead of if Augie was having trouble with 50 yards to people running around and screaming, it's like, I might say, okay, this is not working. Tomorrow I'm going to try 50 yards with people very quietly walking by. Is that easier? Because the intensity is a little bit lower. The other thing that I would also think about is doing this, and this might sound kind of silly, but playing around with this around your home. If you are thinking, oh, there's no place outside that we can do this, I might play around with this at my home. And this might look like I'm sitting someplace in my backyard or in my home, and someone is walking by quickly. My partner is walking by quickly. And I, either my dog, either I'm playing the, engage, disengage for that, or I'm just hanging out there and my dog is kind of getting used to someone walking by quickly. Can you think of anything else, Marnie?
If you're at a distance where the person can get used to the person, where the dog can get used to the person walking away, I might do some click for looking as they turn.
Yes. Yeah.
Move away. Moving away can be triggering for some dogs, more triggering than moving toward, especially with a dog who's fearful. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
But
I
there's,
might be doing that again in a managed situation with, family.
yeah. Yeah. But Cynthia, I mean, it's like, I feel your pain because it's like it's the tough dogs that that really challenge us when we're like, okay, 50 yards is not enough, so now I literally have to go to a park or something, and but I think maybe starting some of this stuff with people and things that are familiar to the dog and kind of getting that click, like Marnie said, that click for looking happening in super easy situations where you're 99% certain that your dog is going to be able to respond to that.
Okay, so I wanted to go back to some of the questions that we didn't touch on yet. A couple in
Sure.
particular, I want to make absolutely certain we grab. The one from Lois, love your question. At rally class today, had a substitute teacher, male, and my dog on leash wanted the man to move away and lunged toward him 3 times. Yeah, I'm totally with you, dog. It's like, get out of my yard.
Yeah.
The teacher said to correct the dog, which I infer from what you say, he intended to apply some punishment. I'm reluctant to use a leash pop when the dog is afraid. Yay, you, Lois. You are totally on target. You are fabulous. And what should I do next week when we have the same sub teacher and my dog lunges unleashed toward him? So I'll take a stab, and Susan, if you have anything to add. So I don't know the setup of the rally class. I would say you see the teacher coming toward your dog. I would practice U-turns between now and then. And I would do kind of close quarters U-turns, get to my dog's shoulder, treat at the nose, guide them away. And I would, as the teacher approaches, I would take my dog away to add some distance. And I might continue to have food in my hand that my dog, so this is my hand, this is my dog, that my dog can be kind of nibbling out something really stinky and lovely that, humans find gross and dogs find amazing and awesome. And just kind of keep his pointy bits in his nose in your hand. If the teacher is too close for your dog's comfort and for your comfort, especially since he's a substitute, I might be really kind of firm. I'm sorry, you need to add some space. And if they say to correct him, say, I don't punish my dog in training. And not knowing kind of what the setup is, if it's possible and comfortable to talk to the teacher beforehand, and say, I'm working with this approach. I really need to make it work in this way. I need your help with that. That'd be great. I do know that some folks, some trainers kind of go with old-fashioned methods and feel like a dog shouldn't have feelings and, should just kind of do what you tell them. And which I want my dog to do that too, but I want to negotiate to get there rather than shutting my dog down. All right. Anything to add, Susan?
Yeah, that all sounds great. That's exactly what I'd be doing. Just, yeah,
Okay.
I mean, if you can, especially if you can talk to him, a few minutes before, leave your dog in the car and walk in and say, hey, this is what I need to do. I know it's hard to do that. Ugh, it's so hard.
It is so hard. Yeah.
Yeah. But you know what? I've never suggested that anybody correct their dog when something's going wrong, but I so appreciate someone coming to me and saying, hey, last week in class, my dog struggled with this. Can we try this? I'm like, because that tells me the human is thinking and problem solving and standing up for their dog. Absolutely, we can try this. Yeah. So hopefully they'll appreciate it.
So Pamela had a question. What about at a dog show? So we were looking at treat tosses and find its and such. Dropping treats could attract other dogs. 100%. Backing up will result into backing into other handlers or dogs. Yeah, and when you're practicing backing up with your dog, do make sure there's not a coffee table behind you. Ask me why I say that. So what's your suggestion for drawing your dog's attention or settling them in a crowded situation? So, couple of pieces. And this is kind of one of these things that, I know my clients and students are just tired of hearing me say, practice beforehand. So if you, I don't know how much time there is between dog shows that you go to. If you have time to practice with some friends or family members, creating a crowded, a crowded situation, a synthesized version of that, I would totally practice working with your dog, keeping your dog's attention. Again, if you're in a situation where you can use food at all, obviously, yeah, dropping treats, that's going to be a challenge with other dogs. But I might fill my hand with kind of a golf ball or tennis ball size amount of a really stinky food and do what I'm totally appropriating this term, do what we call a transport. And this was a term that came out of an agility troop, if you will. Fill my hand again, is my hand, is my dog, and put my hand just right down in front at my dog's nose level. Hopefully your dog is of a height where that's easy for you, but put my hand right there and practice with my dog guiding them past the thing. I know I should be doing hand puppets. So I've got my hand down in front of my dog and we're moving past the thing. Can practice that with moving past a toy, moving past a person, build that skill. I even give it a cue. I do say transport before I put my hand down and do it. Had one client dog, human reactive German Shepherd, who loved to have a tennis ball in her mouth that a person was holding. And so her people would do transport with a tennis ball in their hand. It was the bomb for that dog. She could move past anything. So I would be doing something that would guide my dog either to hang next to me or to move past other dogs. Tara had a good question. I am a dog walker, which means when I meet a new client, I am the stranger. So you're the stranger all the time, Tara.
Yeah.
Hats off to you. Since I still have a job to do and may only see them for 30 minutes, 1 to 5 times a week, what are some better options when meeting them and first establishing a relationship of trust with them? I would totally be doing treat toss. And let me pass that question over to Susan.
Yeah, I would play treat toss. Absolutely. I mean, usually, I know a lot of dog walkers will have sort of an introductory session where they're not expected to take the dog out, like the owner is there. So I would definitely be playing treat toss with that. Not necessarily with the idea of ever touching the dog or feeding the dog out of your hand, which is how the game should be played. But just playing treat toss is perfect. And you know your business better than I do. So certainly having a discussion with the owner about, are there things that this dog loves to do? So like maybe chasing a toy and having them chase the toy while you move away, so.
I would add just one thing, which is if the dog is crated when you get there, I would use find its or a treat toss away from the crate to get them out. I wouldn't reach in to get the dog. You probably already know that because you do this all the time. So we had one more. Oh, stand for exam. Margaret says, training my dog for obedience competition, the stand for exam has been tough. He really does not enjoy a stranger's touch. How can I help him reach a level where he can stand for that extreme closeness? Do you want to start that one, Susan?
Yeah, I would be certainly practicing this. I know we keep saying this, practice in advance, but the more you can practice in advance with people that maybe your dog starting off with your dog kind of knows, and then advancing to maybe friends that your dog hasn't met, You know, you need to trust your friends to follow your instructions.
Yeah.
That's the big limitation here. I mean, I know it's really tough, you know, and just I think practicing with lots of different people. Anything else you can think of, Marnie?
Yeah, a couple of things. One is it's really easy for us to think about how the actual touching, you would think I could say that without having to do that, but I can't. How the actual touching, we're aware of that as a trigger, but the fact is there are things that lead up to the touch that are predictors for your dog. And those are often the places to train. So
Yeah.
a friend, someone your dog likes is coming to help you with it. Initially, rather than just reaching out and touching, they might just reach a hand towards your dog a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, not a thing we would do with a strange dog. We've talked about how that plays into stranger danger, but in terms of helping your dog get used to that, they need to be comfortable with the hand reaching. So if they just do a little bit of a reach and your dog's good, you're like, yes, give them, you know, filet mignon, tiny bit. And, you know, repeat 5 repetitions and then give your dog a break. So I'd be looking at the intervening things between I'm not being touched and I am being touched, which are predictors for that. I'd also look at fearfreehappyhomes.com, which deals with veterinary handling and grooming, but they're related things. And there is, I'm trying to remember.
It's Deb Jones.
Deb Jones, thank you.
Yes, she's fabulous at teaching this and helping us learn how to do this. Yeah.
Yeah. She offers classes through the Fenzi Dog Sports Academy, which is
Yeah.
online. She also has her own cooperative care competitions, if you will, with resources. She certifies for cooperative care. So I would check through that. All right. Thank you, guys. You've had the best questions.
So I just realized that I wanted to, Cynthia asked that question about, my dog has very high prey drive and, you know, really responds to things that are a lot of movements. There is a woman who has a brilliant program, because this is really more about sort of teaching our dogs to, because you said it was like chipmunks and mice and squirrels. There's something called predation substitute training. And it's Simone Mueller. That's
Yes.
it. Yes. I highly, highly, highly recommend. Honestly, a lot of the stuff that she sort of incorporates is very kind of similar to what we're talking about here, which is practicing certain things at a distance, finding that distance, you know, teaching your dog that, oh, I can actually see some of this stuff and still stay connected to my human. It's super valuable, wonderful. She has a lot of free stuff, but she also has a full online training thing that is, and books. Yeah.
So I've got a question for you guys to address.
Yeah.
What about a dog who is, for example, the Aussie that we're trying to get strangers to touch? What about the idea of perhaps it's not a realistic expectation that that dog is going to be able to let strangers touch them?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I meant to say that and then got distracted. Yes, that it might not be that dog. Yeah.
Yeah.
He or she. And I think doing some of the training, that we spoke about may tell you, if that's going to be something that your dog can do.
All right, this was absolutely fantastic. Lots and lots of great information. Thank you guys so much, Susan and Marnie, for spending the time with us this afternoon and doing
Love
such a
being
wonderful presentation.